Good evening. My name is Sandra Carrasco. I would like to welcome you to this book launch event for our project, our book, A Home for the Diaspora, from the Horn of Africa to Melbourne's public housing. First, I would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people, who are the traditional custodians of this land. I would also like to pay respect to the elders, both past and present, of the Kulin Nation, and extend that respect to other Indigenous Australians present. I also would like to acknowledge the diversity and multiculturalism that a reality that in which we live every day in our cities and suburbs, our schools, and workplaces, in all the places where we converge and dream with a peaceful, harmonious, and collaborative society. So today, this is a very important day for us, because we are fulfilling a small step that we hope we can help the community with, and this is part of the journey that we started in 2018. So this is the book that you have. And we, the authors, is with myself, Neeraj, who is here next to me, and Majdi, who unfortunately is not in Melbourne at the moment. So I would like to invite Neeraj to introduce himself.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Neeraj Dangol. I'm originally from Nepal, and I came around 5 years ago to Melbourne to do my PhD in the University of Melbourne. I completed around 1 year ago, and yeah, that's it for now. Then I'm handing over to this.
Thank you very much. So I'm Peruvian originally. I came here also 4 years ago, and Majdi as well is from Tunisia. So I'm from Peru. Neeraj from Nepal. We are a multicultural team here working. And something that united us is that we have similar experience in sense that we also face challenges to adapt. This is the land we like, we learn to love. We want this land to be our home, but we also understand that it's difficult to restart our lives. And with this understanding, we wanted to honor our friends from the Horn of Africa, and that's how we try to get closer to the experiences they share with us. So before we continue, we'd like to go to the next slide. There's a message from the University of Melbourne.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this event celebrating the release of A Home for the Diaspora, from the Horn of Africa to Melbourne's public housing. Having seen the amount of effort, but also the amount of pleasure and joy that has gone into the creation of this book, it's really wonderful to be here today, having seen it come to fruition. So congratulations to Dr. Sandra Carrasco, Neeraj Dangol, and Majdi Faleh for their work in putting together this really important piece of research. Congratulations also, and my gratitude also to the storytellers that have contributed to this piece of work. I imagine that many of you are in the audience, and so I'm very grateful for the insights that you have provided into this piece of work. My name is Dr. Katrina Raynor. I'm the academic convener for the Hallmark Research Initiative for Affordable Housing. And the Hallmark Research Initiative for Affordable Housing is the group of researchers from across the University of Melbourne who are committed to affordable housing research and advocacy. And so it's a great pleasure to have supported this piece of research and to now see it be shared with the world. So before I continue, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. And I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and also pay my respects to any Indigenous Australians who may be in the audience today. Now, I know that Sandra has curated a really interesting panel discussion tonight, And so I hope that you really enjoy it, and I will keep this introduction very brief so you can get on to the good parts as quickly as possible. But I did want to say that we're particularly pleased to be amplifying the narratives of African migrants and refugees who live in Melbourne's public housing. And we're glad to be celebrating the skills, capacities, creativity, and resourcefulness of members of our community. As an affordable housing research group, we're also really pleased to be building greater understandings of sense of home, sense of place, sense of community, feelings of community cohesion, housing satisfaction, and better understanding the positive and negative experiences of living in public housing. And so I know that this particular book is part of a broader project that Sandra and her colleagues have been working on, and I'm really excited to see where it will go. So I will conclude by saying congratulations to the authors, congratulations to the contributors, and I hope that you have a really good night tonight. Bye.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the University of Melbourne. This project started in 2018 when there was the opportunity to apply for some support from the Economic and Social Participation Hallmark research initiative, that the Spirit Hallmark. And we are here today thanks to the support from the Affordable Housing Hallmark from the University of Melbourne. So let me explain a little bit what is the origins of this project and how we started to be motivated about to understand and to explore the challenges, but also the opportunities of our great friends from the Horn of Africa. So when I came to Melbourne in 2017, I moved to Carlton as a Carlton resident in Carlton. I lived in the student accommodation just next door to the public housing estates. And I was always intrigued by the people that were living there. Back then I didn't know these towers were public housing. I just seen that the people were so vibrant, the people were enjoying in the public spaces, and I was thinking, I would like to live here. It was interesting. And I remember there was a festival in 2017. And it was very interesting to see that something that so far I haven't seen in my life. Being from Peru, from South America, we have Peruvian African communities, but the community dates back to colonial times. So we don't have that sense of vibrant culture from Africa in my home country. So then we started to be intrigued with Majdi from Tunisia, and we wanted to know what is happening here. Back then we didn't have that close contact with the community yet, but we're starting to see the challenges of living in this kind of public housing. We tried to have an idea, or trying to compare with similar residential areas in Paris, and we started to notice something, that the people who have disadvantages face more challenges in terms of housing. So this first piece was not really focusing on the people, but focusing on the buildings. But we've seen that there was more happening there, and thanks to Majdi, and we started exploring how to connect with the people. Majdi, he speaks Arabic, so he started talking with the men, sometimes in the mosque in Carlton. And myself with the ladies, and we started to uncover something, but that for us was something very different in terms of culture, but but at the same time, we felt connected. So, and from these early experiences, we had a public lecture in 2019. I think some of you came to this event because we have a lovely presentation here by Sister Muhubo, who gave us another dimension of housing. That housing was not just the high rises, was not this concrete kind of post-Soviet-like architecture, but it was the housing was a culture, was something that was inside them, and something that they were very desperately trying to reconnect also in Carlton. So this is a traditional rural Somali house. So and this is this also led us to some other events. We organized some workshops with handcrafts, weaving with the ladies, where we've seen also something interesting, that was not only the ladies from the community who joined, but also people from outside. And the more we explore, the more we understood all this, the community, we didn't really focus on what was right, what was wrong. We didn't focus on the challenges. We focused on what would be the opportunities to have this permeability, this exchange of experiences between the people inside the housing and also the people outside. So, and it was even, the more we get curious about understanding the community, we also infuse this shared curiosity at the university where we were working. So I had the pleasure to introduce my students to one of our sisters in the housing and show them how is the community, to try to break that myth that this is that it is another world we should not enter. And this is where giving more clues about what was necessary in this for the community. So with this experience, we had there was a symposium last year about our project organized with affordable housing, Hallmark, and is available online as well. The interesting thing here is that we also had the opportunity to exchange some experiences with a professor from the Middle Tennessee State University, who is working with the Somali community there. So we started to learn more and understanding what with not just the challenges, but what could be the opportunities. And that is actually, before coming here, that is actually the message that we have in our book. We are not looking at the community from the Horn of Africa as a helpless community. We are looking that they faced difficult challenges, but we are focusing on the resilience that was built through this journey, each individual journey, that we capture in each of the experiences, in each of the stories. And that's the message we want to share with you. But at the same time, we are not just seen as a perfect community where there are no problems, there are problems. And what we would like to do is to suggest, based on our observations, what would be the best, or what we could do, what would be our lenses to approach the community. And with this idea, I think last year in July, we were all shocked when suddenly we had the hard lockdown in the public housing towers. For us, for all of us who live in Melbourne, it was already a shocking time. But for our friends, our brothers and sisters living there, it was even worse. For some of them, there was a reminder of what they left behind before they came to Australia. So then we understood then that it was important to find a channel for their voices. Sometimes the community is seen as voiceless and invisible. And we, from the experiences we had with the community and also with the good friendships we established there, we wrote this piece to help to uncover different issues and different perspectives that unfortunately are not seen by the rest of the society. So then, this is the introduction to what is our journey. But also something interesting is that we observed that, as you can see in the book, the public housing ironically became an incubator for community. And I would like to invite my colleague Neeraj to explain you how we found this.
So when we started our research project, in the beginning we started as an academic project. So when we started looking at migrants in Melbourne, we found that community from the Horn of Africa is one of the most vulnerable communities here. Then we decided to do our work on this community. And the first thing we look at the map, it's the first step, how we understand Horn of Africa. Then we learn that it's the group of country, Sudan, South Sudan, Eritrea, Djibouti, and Somalia, and Ethiopia. And then we, when we do more research on the history of migration, then we found that the main drivers for the migration from the Horn of Africa are poverty, violence, natural hazards, political instability, terrorism. So it made us understand that people don't leave their home by their choice. They are forced to leave. And we realized that it's very important for the Australian, other Australian communities or the country or the receiver country where migrants are resettled, they should understand this pain or this experience who are forced to migrate, to understand who are displaced from their home country, to understand their experience or to understand their necessity or to understand their viewpoints. So, as Sandra also mentioned that we are also came here as a migrant, although we have different stories, but it helps us to understand the being away from the home. Then from when we talk to community here, we also found that the similar story, but more painful, with more personal experiences. So that gives us more insights then to understand how was the journey from home country to the Australia. And this image looks a bit complex, but I try to explain. So if you look at these 5 countries, these are the countries from Horn of Africa, and they are represented by the different color. And this curved line or things, it shows population in proportion, proportionately, how big population they migrated from this country to the countries at the right hand side, Australia, Canada, United States, and other countries. And if you look at that among all the migration or resettlement that took place from 1979 to 2018, it's around 500,000 population. So if you look at that population, Australia only got only 12% of that population. So if you look at in global context, only 12% of people from Horn of Africa, they are resettled in Australia. And but I also like to add that it's not the total population who were displaced from their home. As we found, there are around 3 million people who were displaced between this period of time from Horn of Africa. And only around less than 500,000 people, they were resettled in different countries. So others, maybe they're stuck in the refugee camps somewhere in that region, in African region. And sometimes they spend several years there. They have to spend there, and sometimes a generation pass by that way. So we also understood that. And among that 12%, of the global resettled migrants from Horn of Africa, around 28,000, they are in Melbourne. from the record as we learn. And among that 28,000, 17% of them they live in inner Melbourne suburb. So where we focus our study. So we are showing this map, the Melbourne, Greater Melbourne and the inner Melbourne map to show how the migrants or the people from Horn of Africa, they are distributed among different suburbs. And the larger circle shows like proportionately larger population. So as we can see, the larger populations are at outer Melbourne, but there are also like considerable number in the inner and the middle Melbourne. And this red shaded area, that's the inner Melbourne, like, where we mostly focused. So these are the housing estate towers, where we visited several times and interacted. People living there, including some of you, and we learn from your experiences. And some in one like it's more than it took us. This project is like around more than 2 years. It took, and during this period of time, as we spend lots of time going here and meeting people there, so it also experienced that kind of it. So we are also part of the community, as Sandra mentioned, and it was a kind of a self-realizing as a like or evolving as a researcher also. Like we found that we started understanding we are not as a researcher only. We are like part of a community, and actually, and that also kind of a point of realization, because in the beginning we started this project as an academic project. So we can broadly divide it as a 3-phase project. In first phase, our purpose was to understand as an academic, to understand everything about the people communities from the Horn of Africa living in the public housing. And in that stage also, in that phase also, we talked to many people. And then we realized that we need to know more than that, what we found. Then we moved on to the second stage, where we mostly focus on what are the challenges that are like challenging people living in public housing to move out from the public housing and have their own houses. So we focused on there, and we found out many challenges. But during that phase, we realized that if we keep this finding only to within the academic circle, then community may not get direct benefits immediately. In long run, it may be beneficial, but we realized that we should give back to the community what we learn from the community. And then we decided to initiate this third phase, where we listen to the residents, people living in this like our study area, to understand more personal stories, so that we can collect the stories and make a kind of a document that we ended up as like a book. We published as a book. And for this phase also, we talked to many people. We could not include all the stories here. And what we did, we tried to diversify the stories. So based on the countries, from different occupation, gender, age, and ethnicity, religion. So based on these different factors, we selected the stories, these 15 stories, which could be helpful to represent the broader community from Horn of Africa. And you can see there are some, we can see some, you can recognize some of faces who are happy to share their faces and their real name. And but we also use a pseudonym who are not willing to provide their real names. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Sandra for further.
So then, and when we took this decision to change from an academic work, an academic project that we were basically asked many times, why are you living here? Many people came and left, and they leave nothing. We tried to do something that we believe is relevant for the community, because many of them, they say, I would like, I remember these words, I would like the rest of the community or rest of the society know us, so then we can know them as well. So, and also, but even though we tried to cover as much as we could from the Horn of Africa, we understand the differences. We understand the diversity even within one country. We know that in Africa, a country's boundary is not a cultural boundary. There are so much diversity. There are many groups, many ethnicities, but we try to summarize this. It's not that we are not generalizing, but we are trying to capture most of our insights that came from the people themselves, and this is what we found. When we found what is common, what is a common and shared ground for the community. So the first thing we saw is the transition to Australia. It was a difficult time. Many people left their families behind. Sometimes they leave even their dreams behind. But also when they come to Australia, they had to focus, they have to face different sociocultural changes and that challenge them. And among them, one crucial one, together with language or others, was finding a place to live. So we've seen that this strong sense of community and identity that is expressing solidarity and mutual support and very interesting and diverse networks that are not one, they are different within the community. A strong sense of attachment to the community, but also to the culture that it means for them, and the sense of integration through the community. So something interesting is like people feel integrated because they live in community here. Perhaps something that would be having more challenging for the community if they would have lived isolatedly in different places. So a reflection from here is that we observe and we acknowledge that people are segregated, and it is something that has to change. But also we need to acknowledge that perhaps without that segregation, the sense of community would not have been possible. So we observe that there's the communities, there's attachment, and then we need to move forward to see how to integrate as a community, as individuals, as families, to the rest of the society. There are strong connections to the homeland. There are emotional connections. And this is related to the homes that left behind, but also families that they still living in their home countries. And how the community is working towards preserving the traditional structures of community solidarity based on mutual care. Mutual care here in Melbourne, but also mutual care to the communities back in their home countries. So then this is how we came, and we've seen that how the community created home in the public housing. So we observe, and I think we can all acknowledge that there are challenges in Melbourne's public housing in the towers for the community. And we observe that we desperately need some guidance to support and achieve economic independence. There is unfortunately some misled and misunderstood ideas that the community cannot survive on their own, and that's not true. We observe that how the people are investing their time and their lives to achieve economic independence and even support their families back home, even in the case when it means for them to have some more financial challenges here with their families. But also we observe something that is important, that education is crucial to improve their living conditions. So we observe that the first generation, the parents, the mothers that came, they encourage their children to study because it is seen as a way to escape the trap of living in public housing. So we have seen that living in public housing had an important role in building the community, but we are not romanticizing that living in public housing is a good life. So from this is our final reflection. So how we can shape the future. In the same way that when we came here, we are residing in Australia. We love this country, but we are who we are, and we are not willing to change. We keep our values, we keep our identities. And I think this is something that we should, this is a message that we should share even more, that we should, the community wants to preserve the cultural values and that, in fact, enrich the society. We are talking about integration, yes, but it doesn't mean that we need to become someone else to be here. The future of children and youth is one of the main concerns in the community. And we have seen also that investing in them is a way to break the vulnerability and poverty traps. It is crucial to find channels to share the culture with Australian society. And also, with all the programs that already exist, need to be rethink and focus on investing in financial stability for the community and seeing what many don't see, that there are a lot of entrepreneurs in the community, and support them. It's important to rethink the policies and programs that don't focus on community empowerment. So people don't need assistance, people need to be empowered. And something that we've seen in this current crisis, and we've seen before as well, but it was more clear in the current COVID-19 crisis, that it is important, it is crucial to rebuild the trust between the community and government agencies. And we've seen some good examples of this that has achieved through the inclusion, to the engagement, active engagement of the community. And you can see in the book that people are also asking to be included, not only to manage the health problems, but also even to design their living environments. And finally, was another lesson that we've seen from our study, but also talking with our friends, is that there are different structures of leadership and governance in the community that should be not ignored, but also is a very good asset that the government who wants to work with the community should observe and should acknowledge. So we would like to thank all of our friends and brothers and sisters who contributed with their stories and inspired us. Thank you very much. Finally, please, I would like to tell you that there are free books for you here, but also there is a free ebook available online. So this is the link, and we are going to share this with you as well. And now is the time to share our opinions, our perceptions, our comments. And we are very honored today to have 4 people to be in our panel, and myself, I will be standing here contributing to the discussion as well. So we would like, please, if you could introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your role in the community and your opinions, perceptions about our work, and what is the situation in Melbourne's public housing.
Sorry. So I had a bit of hesitation to actually come on this panel because I come from an agency that has a centre at the Carlton Housing Estate. So I'm not a resident at Carlton, but I love working there. And so we have a centre called Open Door. We have an employment program called Make It Work, and we also do support services and activities like yoga and things like that. I'm so happy to be here though. because Sandra and Neeraj came to me quite early in the piece to introduce them. And I think I was one of those people that said, I'm not going to give you any answers. You go to the community and find out what they want. And I think I also said, please think about, a lot of people come in and out of the community and want something. What are you going to leave behind? So I really celebrate tonight. I think you've done an amazing job with the meeting people and embracing the community at Carlton. So I might leave it there and let others talk.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. First, I would like to get these opportunities to introduce myself and to be on this panel. My name is Mahir Ibrahim. I'm originally from Ethiopia. Since I came, I've been living in Carlton area around 20 years. So at the moment, I'm working as health conscious in COVID response, and I met with Dr. Sandra to give her some background information about myself in the community, what's concerning, what's happening. So I shared with her some aspect of my life. So I read the book also when it was in draft forms, and I go through it. So if I say this much, if you ask me, I can say more. If not, that will be enough. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Dewelde.
Yeah, my name is Tolda Kidane. I live in Carlton. I came from Eritrea 30 years ago. I work with Mahir, who's consulate in Carlton. I met Dr. Sandra during the session project in Melbourne University, as well. Elmo is one of the greatest legend for Carlton. She's doing great for the communities, finding jobs, solving problems, and so on. So, this was how I involved with the book. We did the first edition. Hopefully we have the second edition. So we tried our best. If anything is to include or to discuss or to answer questions also, I'm ready. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So you already know Neeraj, and I think we would like to invite our audience, if you want to have some questions for us, some comments. We are really welcome.
That's all right.
Yes.
Of the 28,000 refugees, migrants from the Horn of Africa, what's the gender breakdown? Is it 50-50 or what?
So it's relatively 50-50. Yes. So yeah. We don't have exact number now, but we've seen that. Of course, we don't see that families come together. Sometimes first the father of the family, of the mother of family, there's someone who came first, and then they follow some relatives. So but in terms of the distribution, in terms of gender, yes. How we conducted the research, I understand that there are many ways to see the problem. So we can see from at the statistical level, we can have a mapping of the community, and we can hear the numbers, but it's a way to do research. But there is something that we realize here, that it's okay. We have the statistics from the Australian Bureau of Statistics, and we use them as well. If you see some of the articles that we published in the conversation, we use the information to see how is the situation and what was the challenges of the community towards all the limitations that came with the COVID-19 crisis. But our research is mostly focused on the qualitative side, or the qualitative type of the study, where we are focusing not just to see the numbers. We want to see the human side of the problem. So we understand that both type of studies could be valid, but we didn't want to oversee the community as a number. We wanted to build these narratives, because in terms of methodology, we've seen that this is a way how to really go deeper into the details and see something that could easily be missed when we just focus at the statistics. But I understand that it's very important. We initially tried to get information from the community in the public housing, but we found two main difficulties. The first one is that the lack of trust. People don't have trust to outsiders. Sometimes don't trust to the people in their own community. We understand that. So we try to capture, to get, for example, information about their income and how difficult it was for them to balance their paying the rent, the accommodation towards their income. And we found it was very difficult. People were really happy to share that private information with us. When we went for the social housing, to the Housing Commission, this information this is a second challenge. When we try to find another avenue to find this information, it's not easily available. So, and then we got some insight of this. We understood a part of this, but if we try to focus on the statistical or the quantitative side of the problem, we were in a trap where we could not live. So again, we are not generalizing. We have seen that each of us have specific problems, but we want to provide some insight of what would happen, what's the scenario, what's happening there. In terms of policies, so we tried to contact many times people from the local city councils, and we've seen that there is a reluctance in terms of connecting with academics. And the reason is clear and simple, because policymakers act quickly, but they act because they have protocols, because they have guidelines. We are more analytical, so we don't act that quickly, but we want to understand what's the real problem. So these gaps is not just happening in this case, it's happening in general. There is something that we need to acknowledge, the gaps between the practitioners and the policymakers and the academics. But we were discussing what we can do. How can we share this? We believe that this kind of events we cannot perhaps talk directly to the policymakers, but we can share this and somehow be somewhere where we can say this is the message they want to transmit. So we don't want their community be invisible, and that's what we're trying to do. We are discussing to write some media articles. That's also why you've seen in our presentation that we are not writing academic papers that sometimes ends up in a shelf, that nobody reads that. So that's why we try to project this to the media, so not just us as academics have access to this. And the third thing, we are discussing to write policy briefs. That is the closest we can go. We've seen that it's not easy to access the policymakers, but we're looking for avenues to reach them. And I think, could you remind me the last question? What was the last one? You gave me one more, and I remember now. So something that we also found here, and it was a reflection from Dr. Berham from Africross, that yes, we are collecting the stories of the people. And these stories are for the community for the rest of the community that don't know the people from the Horn of Africa, but also he says something from his experience, that this material and this book is also for the children. That's because we acknowledge something, and it's not something just here, it's in all the migrant communities, that the first generation, that we have the experience as first person, we know how it is to migrate, it's one thing, that we are prepared somehow, even if we are forcibly migrated, somehow because we know we need to restart our lives. But what happened for the second generation? What happened with the children that come young here, that they are we have a conflict, they have the conflict of two identities. And this is a very crucial group that, and this is also like where we hear that these stories can help them also, not to reconnect with where they come from, their parents come from. That is something that we believe is another way to contribute, but to this group. But also we acknowledge that this is also something that we would like to explore. What happens to the 1.5 generation? The 1.5 is like the children the kids that come, when they're very young here, and they basically live most of their lives here. What happens with the second generation? The most crucial. We've seen that there are also conflicts at home, where the children are the ones who speak English and the parents don't. So, and we observe the same similar issues in my community, in Latin American community, for example, that migrated to the United States. So there are common issues that we would like to address at one point. And yes, we really appreciate your words that there is a lot to do here. And we are here as well to find the avenues to keep working with the community.
Yeah. What I want to add is what Sandra explained is that's our perspective, because most of our work, like we have experience of working as academics. But we will be very happy and it will be very helpful for us. But question a suggestion you provided about connecting our findings or our study to the policy level. So it will be very helpful for us from the experienced one, how we can connect how our study can be useful for that policy level change or something to contribute that aspect.
So I'll just add a little bit about getting quantitative data. So I work really hard to get data and people don't want to give it up. Housing is just notorious for being very protective. So I work with council around the ABS every time the census comes out, and we drill down to the Carlton housing estate to get those quantitative figures. But I think, as Sandra might be saying, that's just the beginning. And I think the strength of this project is in that it's telling stories that gives people confidence to hear themselves speak and hear their story out there. And then those very complex issues that you're bringing up very rightly about next generations, and it's just part of the process. And I think, research can't do everything, but in terms of this, it's like I would use this book, really practically, like when I've got the ABS data and then I've got the stories, I can go to, advocacy meetings and put that in front of people and say, this is the community that you're ignoring, or you're not funding public housing, or you're not doing youth programs and that sort of thing. So I think, it's all complementary, isn't it, when you do research?
To add on this one, just based in the community perspective, because I'm not the researcher, but from the community, if we support this kind of project, this kind of research, so if our voice is heard through these things, so that will benefit us, because we, the first generations, maybe we get lost because we have two things to compare. The first is back home, we can see how we live. Then when we come here, then we can compare. We have two things to compare, So, but the next generation, our kids, they are born here. They only know the Australia. And the way they live is different, because we have also something that we brought from back home. We have to introduce that to them. So this may create conflict on them, the way they live. So now, if you imagine, after 30 years, this research is becoming as validated, but it was not before. Had it been 30 years ago, maybe we are not here. We were somewhere else. But there was a purpose when they built this housing, public housing. There was a purpose. So there was input, and the output is like this. So we don't need this kind of output to come. So instead of making after 30 years a research, we, the communities, have to think for our kids what's better. Then instead of making it after 20 years, the research, we have to just from now, we have to predict the problems, we have to predict the things, and we have to challenge those things. We have to do it that way. So to do this, we the communities has to become to one and work on this kind of project. We have to make our voice, our perspectives through this kind of media. And I mean, this kind of research. Then if the research once come, validated, then the policymaker will be forced to change their policies. Because we are the people too. We have kids here. Most of us, we have kids 3 or 4 or 5. These are resources for Australia. If they have the environment, the good environment for them, they are resources, isn't it? So, but the environment will shape our personalities. So we have to give them this opportunity. We have to give them the good environment. Then the output will become the way we want it, the way we design it. Unless this kind of situation, the input and the output is known, experts are known. When we live like this, the output is already known. So, but we don't need that kind of output. So we have to change it. To change it, we communities has to come as a one and use this kind of research, I think.
Okay. Yeah, Ibrahim. Sorry. I just want to add a little bit, then I give you. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Ibrahim was mentioned a great point like integration. I think integration is in terms of socio-economy is great. And without integration also, we can't do nothing in this country. But there is some point, sometimes it's tricky. So there is question we'll ask and needs answer because who is going to integrate? So there's a lot of questions to go. But you have to have integration to live in harmony. Thank you.
My name is Makonnen Waldo. I'm from Eritrea. First of all, I'd like to thank you from the deep most of my heart for taking interest in the problems of the Horn of Africa people. And secondly, I congratulate you for bringing such an output book, which I think might be valuable input information for those policymakers and social workers. Now, my question now is that, I'm repeating the question, what Ibrahim had said, such a project is a means to an end, and the end is to bring about a change in the public housing. Now, how are you going to convince the public, the policymakers and social workers that this problem is a problem and we have to address it? The other thing which I wanted to mention is that such problems like public housing, it's not a question being in Carlton or Melbourne or Sydney or Paris or New York. It is a problem, universal problem in all the public housing places because of the situation of the houses, of the density of the people there, of the environment in that people. So it's basically it is the same problems in everywhere. The problem in Carlton is a problem in Sydney, and it is a problem in New York and in Paris in the public housing sectors. Okay. So for such an information, because for such a study, because it is qualitative and common in many of the countries, the greatest challenge is not to go to the nitty-gritty and find out the small data, because as far as the problem is concerned in the public housing, it's the same for the woman and for the man. The problem is the same if there are 10 people or 20 people. So the problem should be how can we alleviate these problems of the public housing, which in most of the cases is a reflection of the poverty, a reflection of the, whether we like it or not, those people who go to the public housing are the first migrants who come without money, without property, without things. Once they work, of course, they can go out and have a house, their own house. So the problem should the problem should be, how can we help these people to go from that public housing and be independent like all the other people? How do we help them that? Now, how can the government or other services like the banks can help these people to get the deposit they need for having a house? Probably most of the people, as we have talked the other time, most of the people in the public housing, they are working. At least I can speak for the Eritreans. They are hard working and they are earning good money. But they might not have the deposit. They can't have the deposit of 50, 60,000 700. How can the government or the people help them in such aspects? So we better go to the small details of how the government can help these people to go out from the public housing and be independent and have independent house of their own and live their normal life. Thank you very much again for the book.
Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to talk about the second stage of the project that we finalized not too long ago. So to go to as we're telling you, this is one part. We've seen the sense of home, the sense of identity, but we already seen that. The second stage was to see, okay, this is public housing is understood to be a place of transition, not to live there like I've seen 20 years, entire generations there, or feeling in a trap. Should be a place where people have enough confidence, and we're talking about in terms of education, financially, to be able to be independent and live, right? We are not thinking that people living in public housing are helpless. That is a big mistake, I think. As you see, you mentioned as well, we've seen so much innovation, so much motivation there to work, to do things, to perhaps have a vision of the future that we cannot even imagine. Every time we went there, we instead of feeling what others can feel, that it's a place of where there is poverty. We've seen the opposite. We've seen when we left, we felt more motivated to move ahead. So in that sense, there are different problems that, as you mentioned, why people don't leave. So we've seen people that are, for example, don't have access to education. That's what we mentioned. That have a degree back in their home countryside, they don't have the possibility to work here and living in a condition of survival. They work, yes, they work, but it's in a different condition. We've seen different families that were senior people or were young residents that they have to support their parents. You cannot see that in the statistics. You cannot see that there's this kind of communities where the parents, they want to get out. They want to have a future for their families, for their children. They want to have a backyard, but they cannot. And what do they do? So they feel like this is simply out of question for us. So what is in their hands, they invest of their children with the hope that their children will be educated, with the hope that their children will be able to find a place, and hopefully they will be able to leave the public housing with them. That is not possible to see in statistics. We have seen that there's many single mothers raising their children that are, working hard to have, something on the table every day, and the same dream that their children will be better than them. But also, we've seen some families that when we say like younger families, and we ask, why do you don't leave? And there's also many other problems. Like we have to acknowledge here the religious values. So we cannot ignore that in the slum is they cannot go for that alone, that the rest of us, we can. And we cannot just say, okay, come on, do it, if you have the chance. We should respect that. So there is also another layer that makes the problem more complicated, and you cannot find that in the statistics. Again, so we are starting to analyze why they leave. We've seen some cases that people leave whenever they have they feel empowered and they have the training, that both of the parents have to work, because that's how it works in our society here in Australia. They find themselves with some financial stability and they leave. Because, as you know, in the public housing, if you have higher income, you have to pay higher rent. So for them, it's more cost-effective to leave. And we've seen that it's quite interesting. And that's when we go back. So what was the factor that made that possible? Right? In many cases, we've seen that is education, that is training. And is that how they feel integrated, not feeling that that they live here, not living in Melbourne doesn't, for many years, doesn't mean we are integrated, but have that confidence, to be independent. So I can work, I can talk, I can have more than I have now. I can dream with something else, and that is many times the factors that push them to leave the public housing, but also. We heard from some young residents that whenever there comes the time to apply for public housing, because they find also some stability, they reject to do that. They say, I don't want to. I want to force myself to work harder to live. So you see, there are many layers in the problem. And if we want to summarize in some concrete issues. So it's like we've seen like education and empowerment of the community, not just giving them the 50,000, to find the mechanisms for the people to have that, but is empowering the people to understand that the people have capacities. People are not helpless, and we've seen that here. We've seen that in all the cases, people even in the most precarious conditions, they are always fighting towards a better future for them and their families.
Great question. And it's really interesting because I've got a dual thing with research. I love it because it's so interesting, expands your mind, you learn new things. But on the other side, I get really frustrated that does it change things? And I think housing is a human right, and safe and good housing should be for everyone. And I don't think the problem is in the community. I don't think, the resilience and the ambition and stuff is all there. I think the problem is waiting lists for public housing, where people on emergency housing have to wait 3 years, where people who are overcrowded have to wait 10 years. That there's pests and bed bugs that aren't dealt with. Safety is an issue. This is not the community's fault. This is a structural problem to do with the government and funding. And I think, like I said before, something like this, it puts a human face to that so that you can then, argue that case. At the moment, there's submissions are open for inquiries from the state government about public housing, and I think in the way the state government's talking, they sort of talk like there's, homelessness, and that's really bad. And then there's a step up, and you get social housing and public housing. And then the great thing is you get private housing. I actually see that as a continuum. Like if you live in public housing, that should be really good quality housing. You can have a garden if you've got public housing. Why isn't the government investing in that sort of model? But if it's seen just as this, that's bad housing, this is good housing, it creates really difficult barriers for people to move on. So yeah, I could talk a lot about that, but I think, I actually think, trying to find avenues to take this sort of information but get real outcomes, that's our big challenge. And you know, in the past we have big social movements and things like that, and with public housing, a lot of people are just struggling to survive, just, you know, struggling to work 2 or 3 jobs. And so it's up to all of us to find those ways to make change. And I guess I come from an agency, so I get paid to do it, but I love working with anyone that has insight and ideas and a bit of energy to see those outcomes.
Okay, I think this will be the last question. Sorry.
It's sort of connected. Sorry, but what I'd just like to get anyone's viewpoint. So I was involved in a campaign a couple of years ago to try and stop the government demolishing 11 public housing estates. These are the 3-storey walk-ups. And what I think I became very aware of, it was a campaign not just to save public housing, but stop the destruction of communities. And my observation is that the important thing about public housing is it's long-term, permanent, secure, like even though no governments are trying to destroy that. So that allows communities to develop. And whereas if you're constantly, you know, dancing around short-term rentals, 6-month rental, 1 year rental, and having to move every 12 months, then you can't put down roots in the community. And I think there's been a lack of recognition in society about the communities that exist in public housing, and, you know, they overemphasise antisocial behaviour, which exists in private housing just as much as it does in public housing. But my observation is where they've done public housing redevelopments and forced people out, and people have to fight to come back, usually that's destroyed the community, like the Rathdown Street redevelopment was one example. I think the Kensington public housing redevelopment was that. And I'm in the community I was closest to was in West Brunswick public housing estate, and really that a lot of the Somali families, especially the single mothers, were absolutely destroyed. And, you know, some of them, when they lived in private housing, felt very isolated till they moved to that estate. And then people have become very isolated since they were forcibly relocated. Now, obviously, if people want to leave, that's fine. People should be able to leave if they want. But I also agree that what Elle was saying, the federal government has been trying to destroy public housing, or it's federal and state governments, so they haven't wanted to do the repairs or, you know, provide good quality housing. But I think we need to defend, this is my viewpoint, but people are open for discussion, we need to defend the idea of permanent, secure public housing. And a lot of people in Australia, for decades, grew up in public housing. Some might have been public housing which was a standalone house, some might have been public housing towers, but the government's been on a campaign to try and make people feel ashamed for living in public housing, and I think it's a government propaganda to try and destroy public housing. Anyway, that's my take, but I know that's not focused around Horn of Africa community, but it's actually for everybody, regardless of what community we're in. And it's good that you focused on the community, which did come to life, or was very much more visible, it didn't just come to life, during the hard lockdown of the housing towers, because the government wasn't able to provide people with nappies and food. The community organised that. So that was a example of the wonderful things in the community. Sorry, I've rabbited on.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes. I just try to shed some lights based in a community things, not in the research. And your idea is very nice, and we should have to struggle to keep the public housing. But, when a public housing, as we said, it is some transition point for some people, yeah? But when me and my wife was married and we were single, so we are happy to live there. But when we give birth and when children come, now the change has to come for us. then we have to move from this place, and somebody has also to replace us. Now what's happening here is these people, they built their community, they're very fine, everything is okay. But now when the kids came, when the kids grow, inside the room you don't have room to share, become crowded, you know. So there must be some transition, as he mentioned. There must be some opportunities, possibilities to move these people and to bring another ones, so that the community, the cycle will continue like that. But to allow that to demolish this kind of public housing is not right, I think. We have to keep it. We have a lot of memories. We live there. So when we make transition, we have to think some other people also will come and make the same transition. But now it is a matter of time and a matter of your family. When your family grows, and then you have to move. So as El mentioned, when people are waiting 10 years for this kind of thing. So if the government allowed to build, enough houses, so these people will move from here to there, and another people will come, they will make their community, they will grow up there, then they move, so the cycle will go. This is just from a community perspective, yeah. But I will support you, in keeping those public housing alive for you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much to our panel members. Thank you very much to everyone. I think we are already a bit late. We would like to continue the discussion. If you feel you would like to share some insights, some comments, some opinions, we welcome all of that. And please, our business cards are here. So please send us an email. And also, I would like to remind you that the book is available online. It's free. You can download. So thank you very much for all of you to come. Thank you very much for you to help us. Thank you.